and to have my colleagues from Creative Victoria joining us. I'm calling to you. I'm still in my home, although some staff are back in the office, and both the office and my home are on Wurundjeri country of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. One thing that I have taken away is an appreciation of country since being in lockdown and really enjoying those walks along the Mary Creek. So I acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded and that I work on stolen land. Today we've got Chloe here with us, who will be talking us through the Music Works October 2021 funding round. So over to you, Chloe.
Awesome. Thank you so much. My colleague Jack is also here. He'll be helping me answer some questions in a little bit. So if you do have any questions, the best way for us to navigate that is to probably put them in the chat, and then we'll have a section for questions at the end. But I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm zooming in from Wurundjeri country here in Fitzroy North. So thanks everyone for joining us virtually. Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about the Music Works October 2021 funding round. It's going to be a lot of information. A lot of it is in the guidelines and on our website, and also you can give us a call if you have any questions and stuff like that, or any specific questions that we can't get to today. So in terms of the program, we've been running it now for quite a few years, the Music Works program. This latest round has changed a little bit from what it has been like in the past. But hopefully when we go through all that, everything will make sense. Essentially, it aims to support and strengthen Victoria's position as a leading state for contemporary music. It has a bunch of aims, which are all on the slides, but essentially it is about nurturing the diverse and unique creative talent of Victoria's contemporary music industry, increasing the range of and demand for Victorian contemporary music offerings for local and international audiences, providing opportunities for artist and business development, and encouraging the resilience, adaptability and sustainability of the music industry in light of the ongoing impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. So there's a lot of aims there, but it's quite a broad program. So usually accepts a lot of different activity, from touring to recording to professional development to collaborating to writing new music. It's quite a broad program. So in terms of what is contemporary music, for the purpose of this program, because we have a lot of grant programs at Creative Victoria, we have made a definition. And for the purpose of that, it is defined as Victorian musicians creating new musical works now with a clear intention and strategy to connect with audiences, and Victorian individuals, organisations and businesses surrounding these musicians, which make up the industry in which they operate. So, you know, you've got your record labels, your managers, your bookers, etc., etc. With the program, there are 3 streams that you can apply to. Firstly, we've got the First Peoples stream. So if you identify as Aboriginal or First Peoples or First Nations, there's a stream for you to apply through directly. That stream will be assessed by a First Peoples led process, which is guided by our First Peoples Direction Circle. The second stream is a stream for deaf and or disabled applicants. So this one will be assessed by a panel of music industry peers who have lived experience of deafness and disability. Applications that are not deaf and disabled led, but may involve, you know, key participants who do identify as, may also be assessed by this stream if that's appropriate. And a third stream is the general stream for everybody else. So with this stream, you can apply for, through that, and this will be assessed by panels made up of just people from the industry with certain different genres, different music industry backgrounds and stuff. If your applications are containing any kind of First Peoples content, but you're not the First Peoples led applicant, we will also get those applications reviewed by a First Peoples kind of review panel who will go through kind of cultural protocols and check the cultural content is being met and that kind of stuff. Program dates. So the program is now open. and it will close on Thursday, the 25th of November at 3 p.m. So our old programs used to close at a different time, but just remember that now they close at 3 p.m. So that's a key thing to take away. It's 3 p.m, not later, definitely 3. So yes, still got a couple of weeks. And this round is for activity that is starting after the 1st of March, 2022. So, for activity happening essentially next year. And it will take 12 weeks approximately for you to find out whether you are successful or not in the program. And I'll go through the assessment process shortly. So in terms of eligibility, it is open to music industry professionals from all genres, career stages, etc. We accept 1 application per applicant. If you have received funding under the Creative Ventures program, which was another program that we ran earlier this year, this means that you aren't eligible to apply for Music Works funding for the same activity. This will be only relevant to a very small group of people. So if that might be you, just give us a call and we can chat about it. If you don't know what that means, that probably means that it's not relevant. So that's fine. There's also a big list of ineligible costs in the program guidelines. I'm going to be referring to them a lot throughout this presentation. So I highly recommend that if you haven't already, have a good read through the program guidelines, take out a highlighter, really just go to town and get your head around all of the ineligibility and all of the recommendations and everything in there. But yes, there's a lot of stuff in the guidelines in terms of ineligible costs and stuff like that. I'll go through some of them now, but it's on page 4 if you want to go back and have a look. Some of the things that won't be funded through the program include competitions, prizes, awards, or fundraising activities, tertiary courses that are eligible for Australian government help loans, business startup costs, capital purchases, or recurrent administrative infrastructure, other kind of organisational costs that aren't directly associated with the project. Also, it doesn't cover reimbursement of expenses that have already incurred or any kind of like retrospective costs. We also don't fund any projects that have less than 75% of original Australian music or compositions, I should say. And there's a few more things. So have a good look through that. If you have any questions about that, obviously feel free to give us a call. That's another thing I'm going to be repeating. Call program staff and read through the guidelines. So another thing around the eligibility, as on the slide says, priority is going to be given to projects that intend to actively develop and build commercial capacity of the contemporary music industry, and which can be delivered in a COVID-safe way or can easily adapt in the face of COVID-19 health restrictions. Obviously, it's a difficult time to be planning things and doing events and, moving forward after we've been in and out of lockdown a lot. But I guess being able to show in your applications that you can adapt and you've got contingency plans and stuff is something that we're going to be really looking for. So in terms of the amount of funding that you can apply for between $4,000 and $40,000 for individuals and groups of artists or organisations. Applications that are applying for more than $20,000 and above must have a minimum of 20% of the request in cash co-funding. So if you're applying for $25,000, you must have a minimum of $5,000 from another funding source in your income. We also have access costs, so accessibility costs. All applicants are encouraged to include access costs in their budget, and there's a special budget line in our online form for the access costs. These can include Auslan, captioning, audio descriptions, materials and other formats, etc. And applicants under the deaf and disabled stream specifically, which is stream 2, may apply for an additional amount of up to $5,000 on top of their general project costs in order to cover any specific access costs that may help reduce barriers for any deaf and disabled artists or industry workers who are directly involved in the project. In terms of the application process, If you applied in the past, we are using a different type of grants portal now. So I guess that's the first thing to flag. It will look a little bit different. The form will look a little bit different, and you don't need the login and everything that you would have used in the past for our old grants portal. But now on the Creative Victoria grants page for each program, there'll be a specific link that you click on to access that application form. So essentially, first step, go to the MusicWorks funding page, find those links, start to register and have a look at the form. You register with your email address, create a password, all of those kinds of things that you're used to when you're getting into online portals. As steps 3 and 4 say, read the guidelines thoroughly, contact program staff, so me and my colleagues Marsha and Rain, if you have any questions. There are a bunch of really helpful tools on the Creative Victoria website, including an application drafting tool, which essentially is a Word document that has all of the questions outlined in it. So you can work out of the portal first and, you know, share that with band members or managers or whoever you might be working with to put in your grant and fill in all the questions, and then you can copy that information into the portal. So we've got that tool. And then there's also a budget drafting tool. So this one is an Excel sheet that you can download so you can work on your budget, figure out exactly how much you want to ask for, figure out where your income's coming from, how you're going to break down your expenses, that kind of thing, before copying it into the budget in the portal. So you can download both of those on the Creative Victoria webpage. And then, yeah, copy your information into the actual portal form, upload your support material, which I'll get to in a second, and submit your completed application by 3 p.m. on the closing day. And you will receive an email when you've set up your draft application and also when you submit your application. So that will all come through to confirm that. I'm going to have a quick drink and I'm going to read through the application questions. So they have changed a little bit if you've applied before to MusicWorks. But there are 4 questions for the grant form. First one is really just, what is the proposed activity? So, you know, what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? Who's it going to involve? Why are you doing it this way, etc. The second question, how do you plan to deliver the activity in a COVID-safe way in 2022? This question refers to the viability criteria, and I'll get to the assessment criteria in a moment. The third question, what impact will the proposed activity have on the applicant and or any participants specifically in terms of career development and sustainability? So this refers to the impact for the applicant criteria, and you want to be addressing, you know, short-term career outcomes and long-term career outcomes. So really thinking about, you know, how is this going to benefit your career in the music industry right now? And immediately when you do this, maybe it will mean you'll get new opportunities. Maybe you want to meet certain goals, like you want to get a booker or a manager or go on tour with a certain band. But then in the long term, maybe it's going to set you up really well to work on your second album or to go overseas and tour or something like that. So really thinking about long-term and short-term goals as well. And the fourth question is, what impact will the proposed activity have on the Victorian contemporary music industry and audiences? So this one is referring to the third criteria, which is around music industry sector and also audiences. And so this one, you'll be thinking about, you know, who is your audience? How are you going to let them know about your work? What impact will this have on them? And then also more broadly, the music industry and how this is going to impact that. But I'll get to that when I talk about the criteria, which are here. So there's 3 criteria. The first one, impact for the applicant / participants. So this is the one before when I was talking about short-term, long-term goals. I'll read out some kind of sub-dot points that are also in the guidelines. And I highly recommend when you're drafting your answers to these application questions that you go to the assessment criteria matrix in the guidelines and kind of use that as a guide to make sure that you're addressing all of the points properly. So for the first criteria, it's going to be looking at things like the activity's positive impact on the careers of the music industry professionals involved, including through paid work and collaborations. if the proposed activity is timely and relevant in the context of the applicant's career, how the proposed activity follows or builds on previous music industry activity, the potential of the activity to increase the adaptability, sustainability, or resilience of the applicant's practice or career, and whether the short and long-term outcomes stated to be achieved through the activity or project are appropriate and achievable. So that's the first criteria. And all of this is on page 7 of the program guidelines if you want to refer back to it. And I highly recommend you do refer back to it a lot. The second criteria is impact for the Victorian contemporary music industry / audiences. So this one is around if the proposed activity has the potential to contribute to the quality and reputation of the Victorian music industry nationally and internationally, whether the activity is likely to increase the adaptability, sustainability, and or resilience of the Victorian contemporary music ecosystem, the activity's positive impact for Victorian audiences / communities through increasing the availability of and access to diverse music offerings with high artistic merit, if the application demonstrates an appropriate understanding of target audiences or communities nationally and or internationally and a clear strategy for their engagement, if the proposed activity has the potential to generate new market audience development opportunities, and whether the project or activity addresses issues of equity and inclusion within the Victorian contemporary music industry. And the third criteria is viability. So this one is essentially making sure that the project is well planned. Have you shown the panel members that you can actually do it? Do you have enough support? Is it, have you done a realistic timeline? Is it going to be achieved? So the things that this one looks at are the track record and the capacity or the experience of the applicant and the collaborators to be able to undertake the activity, whether there's clear commitment from key collaborators, whether the budget is viable, and realistic, including contingency plans and the provision of appropriate fees to creatives and collaborators. So making sure that everyone is being paid and being paid properly, including yourself. Project management and achievable planning, including realistic timelines, and that if that timeline, includes contingency and potential risks and stuff like that. Whether the project is able to proceed in a COVID-safe way in 2022 or adapt at short notice in response to changing COVID-19 health restrictions, or whether the application presents a viable contingency plan that it happens. Where proposals involve working with First Peoples or other diverse communities, the panel will consider if the applicants demonstrate best practice and appropriate cultural protocols and competencies, including appropriate fees for community consultations, participants, letters of confirmation, etc. And demonstrated awareness of regulatory requirements associated with the proposed activity, like permits and stuff like that. So it's a lot of words. But as I mentioned, all of this is in the guidelines on page 7. This is the assessment criteria that you're going to be directly kind of looked at when your application is being assessed. So there's that, and they all relate back to those application questions. So next up, we've got support material. So when you're putting together your application, essentially in the form, you answer those 4 questions. There's a whole bunch of tick box questions. There is a budget, and then the support material is there for you to provide supporting documents to strengthen your application and really strengthen your case. So not all types of support documents that are listed in the guidelines are going to be relevant to your project. Just choose the ones that obviously make the most sense. You can upload and submit up to 10 files or URLs. They can be no more than 5 megabytes in size each. And I'll go through some examples. So we've got audio tracks. This one's really important if you want to apply for anything, really. The panel want to be able to understand what you sound like. They want to get an indication of what your vibe is, where you fit in the music industry, what kind of music you're making, what level it's at. If you've got rough demos, that's also fine to include. You don't just have to upload really polished, mixed and mastered tracks. They can be voice memos off the phone. Like the panel just really want to understand what you're trying to make. So yeah, just use what you've got. And so it's 3 tracks, no more than 15 minutes in total. Some other examples might be programming. So if you're applying to run a festival or a series of events or a tour or stuff like that, kind of might want to see who's going to be playing, you know, the dates, locations, who's involved, etc. Audio, visual, YouTube, social media, Facebook, website, those kinds of links, they can all be included as support material. The timeline is really important. So this can really be in whatever format makes sense for your project. Some people use Word docs, they might just have dot points. Some people might have like a full-on Excel timeline. There's no template on our end, but the panel want to see that you've got a planned project. There's key milestones that you want to meet and when you want to meet them. And as mentioned previously, that there's contingencies in there. There's room for issues with COVID health restrictions and stuff like that, and that you've thought about those possible risks. You can include CVs and bios as support material. Another one is budget notes. So if you're doing a tour and you've got in your income ticket sales, you might have budget notes in a separate support document that break down how you got to that random number in your ticket sales income. Is it 300 sales of tickets at $10 each, you know, breaking it down, showing the panels how you actually got to those numbers and where those figures kind of come from, so they can see if it's realistic and achievable and in line with industry standards. You can also include quotes. Quotes are quite recommended, especially for like large money items. So if you're going to be working with a producer or a recording engineer or something like that, and you have a direct quote, you might just want to include that so they can see that yes, it is going to cost $3,000 for the studio time, etc. Marketing and audience development strategies. So this could be publicity proposals, marketing strategies, that kind of thing. There's also touring itineraries that you can include if you're applying for a tour. And then also key partner confirmations. If your activity is involving First Peoples cultural material, there are certain links in the guidelines that you can look at and refer to in terms of cultural protocols and letters of support that you might need. And also things like, you know, history around your practice. So media reviews, plays, interviews, as well as touring histories, that kind of thing. So again, a lot of information. This support material stuff is on pages 9 and 10 of the guidelines. But again, you only have to include stuff that is relevant to your project. Obviously, if you're trying to get funding to record an album, you don't need to include a touring itinerary. It's just what's relevant, and keep it concise and curated to strengthen your application. Assessment process. So the applications will all be assessed, all be submitted by our online grants portal. All applications will be assessed by relevant external industry peers according to each stream of the program, as I mentioned before. They'll be assessed against those assessment criteria and also the program's aims. There's dedicated panels, as mentioned, for First Peoples applicants and deaf and disabled applicants submitted through those streams. When I say that the applications will be assessed by industry peers, this means that if you haven't come across any peer assessment panel processes before, this essentially means that we get people from the music industry to come on board and assess the applications. So I'm not assessing your applications. I'm not the one making these decisions, but other music industry people are. So we get other musicians, other record label people, other people working in radio, so many other different types of music industry people to come in who have the knowledge and the expertise of the sector to advise on how these applications are being received and meeting the criteria. After we have a final list of recommendations from all of the assessors, the list of recommendations will be approved by the Minister for Creative Industries, Danny Pearson. And then soon after that, we will be able to notify applicants. So that whole process from when applications close to when you'll find out is around 12 weeks. And then we'll get into funding agreements and invoicing. Here's some contact information that's also on the website. If you are applying to Stream 1 for First Peoples, you can call me. And if you're applying to the general stream, you can also call me or my colleague Marsha. And if you're applying to the deaf and disabled stream, you can contact my colleague Rain. But essentially we're all available. So if you have questions, just let us know. This information is on the website as well, so you don't need to frantically write it down or screenshot it. It's just publicly available right there. And that is the end of my slides and all of my talking. So we'd love to hear some questions, and my colleague Jack can also help me answer them so I can have some water and stop talking.
Thanks so much, Chloe. It's really great to have someone talk us through it. Obviously, there is a lot of information in the guidelines, and now we know how important those guidelines are, so you've referred us back to them over and over again, but also just to get a personal insight. We have got a couple of questions. Obviously, it's been a horrific time for the music industry. And one of the questions is about how busy we are at the moment getting back to work, given the restrictions easing and being clear on the 24th of November. And I guess any chance that they might extend the due date for applications, given the current, you know, we've gone from 0 to about 200%, you could say. So
Yes.
Any chance of extensions?
Good question. At the moment, there is no scope for extensions. We do work on pretty tight timelines at Creative Victoria in order to notify people in a timely manner. So at the moment, there's no scope. Jack, did you want to jump in with anything?
No, I think that's right, Chloe. I think the other thing to note is too, we're pretty keen to get the money out there and working. Yeah, we really understand that the pressure's on in terms of getting things moving again, but we're also aware that there are people out there that really do need the funding in their pockets. So the longer we keep the program open for, the longer we take to pay it out, unfortunately.
And I'd say that hopefully everyone's just as busy as you are, anonymous attendee who asked the question. So you're competing against similar people in the industry. Another question's come up about what is the total amount allocated for this round?
That is another good question. I'm going to throw Jack for that one.
Thanks, Chloe. So the budgets aren't set in stone, basically, at the moment. It really does depend on a few things, most particularly on how many applications we receive. I think it's kind of fair to say that most of our programs are super subscribed. I think we generally fund about 10 to 15% of all applications. So for perspective, that's kind of the success rate in our previous programs. So yeah, it's an open-ended question. I'm afraid I can't give a solid answer to at the moment, but we'll be making those decisions once we have all the applications submitted and we're in a position to make a call.
So sorry, can I clarify? There's no set figure for the whole program, and there's also no set figure for the individual streams.
Correct. Yeah, there's no set overall figure.
Yep. And nothing for the individual streams?
No, not at this stage.
Great. We've had a question about feedback from previous applications. Obviously, the last MusicWorks round was a while ago now. Is it still possible to get feedback from that round? So when you're creating again?
Certainly. So if you want feedback from previous application, please definitely give us a call. Sometimes we might be able to do it on the spot, but also sometimes it might be better to email us, so we can actually do some preparation and get up that feedback and prepare ourselves for the call. So I guess with feedback, it's usually better to email so we can schedule something in. So, but yes, we can usually give feedback to you, especially if you're applying again for a similar project. It's really good to just know how that application landed, what you did, what you can do better. So yeah.
Thank you. We've also got a couple of questions about support material. Sometimes we have multiple artists that will be included in the project that's being put forward, and how we can include all of them in only 3 tracks.
Good question. I guess you could, it does say kind of up to three tracks or up to 15 minutes. So if you get like a mix on SoundCloud or something like that, get creative with it, but also you can include other social media, other kinds of YouTube links and stuff like that, just to help give the panel an indication of who it is that you're going to be working with. Obviously, if you've got a big festival or a big event, you wouldn't need to put in an audio track for every single artist, remembering that the panel work in the music industry. So there's a chance they might know who some of these people are already. But in saying that, it's also good to provide the context. Yeah.
Great.
Sorry to interrupt. I think just on that too, Chloe, the size limit on attachments is 5 megabytes. So that's going to be a challenge with a lot of audio material, I'd imagine. We are accepting SoundCloud links for this round. So that's one way you can probably package things up and let panel members know.
A few more questions around what people should actually apply for. So can you apply for overseas tours? Obviously the guidelines have changed with that because we're now allowed to leave the country. Can you apply for music books and documentaries, or is it just for recordings and live shows?
Yeah, so it's pretty broad. I'll answer overseas tours first. Yes, you can apply for overseas tours. I guess you can apply for projects that are in line with the current COVID-19 health restrictions. So if the government is saying that we can travel and tour, then that's okay, that's eligible. I guess a couple of things that we would want to see for overseas tours applications is that firstly, there's a demand and a need, and you've got an audience where you're going, and that, you know, there's maybe you've been working towards that over COVID, or you were going to go there and then COVID happened, etc. So we want to see that real case that, you know, you need to get there and how it's going to impact you and everything. And the second thing is a contingency plan. So if we go into a snap lockdown, if the place where you're going has got big COVID numbers, like, you know, what's your plan B? Is it that you're going to extend or delay or whatever it might be? Just kind of showing the panel that you're thinking about those options and being realistic with it will be important for overseas travel. In terms of the other types of activities, I mean, it's a pretty broad program. Jack, did you want to jump in and provide any answer there?
Yeah, totally. Just like you say, Chloe, it's a broad program. It's intended to be so. So all of the activities that you mentioned there, Simone, I think are well and truly within scope for this program. We've particularly called out kind of new ideas in this program guidelines. So that's a big focus. We're keen to see out of the box kind of proposals. So yeah, all of it.
Okay, that's exciting. Just some ideas on support material. People have been maybe working on an album and whether they should put in the demo rough cut version of it or whether they should put in something polished, given that they want to record it professionally.
I mean, I think either is fine. Giving an indication to the panel of what you've done in the past and what direction you're going in is a really good way for them to see how this is going to impact you and how you're changing and how you're growing. So yeah, a mix of both, I would say.
Great. Some people have asked if you would recommend going for the full amount.
It really depends on what you want to do. So, I mean, a good way to get an indication of how much to apply for is to look at past recipients. And just see, you know, if I look at the past couple of years of recipients, which you can find on our website, how much have people received in the past to record an album or to do a tour. So that's a good way to kind of get a gauge of how much to apply for. But also, if you're working on your budget, you're getting quotes and you're being realistic with it, apply for what you need. Yeah.
I think that's a good point to remember that you're being assessed by a panel of kind of peers too, so they'll have a good idea of what things cost. So if it's realistic, they'll notice that.
Yeah.
And can you clarify again the sort of co-contribution that's required and if that has to be cash or in kind?
Yeah. So you can certainly have in-kind contributions in your budget, but if you're applying for over $20,000, it must be a 20% cash co-funding contribution. If anyone isn't sure what in-kind is, there's plenty of examples online, but a couple that come to mind might be if you are getting a service or something donated. So let's say that you are going to be recording with your friend and they are giving you a discount on the recording. maybe you'd put in that you're going to pay $1,500 for the recording as an expense and $1,500 in kind, because that's kind of the money that you're saving on the recording. So in kind is kind of the like non-cash contribution. Hope that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, budgets, I think, trip a lot of people up. Obviously, they need to work through that, and there is a template provided. And in the online portal, does it automatically do the sums for you as well?
It does, yeah.
Right.
So if you're having any budget issues, just give us a call, because we're all pro at talking to people about budgets on the phones now.
Yeah, just in terms of the budget is it's the idea and the intention. We've just got a question about is the income going towards the project separate to the grant, or is it future income, funds that haven't come in yet but will come in from the project? So yes, we can include ticket sales in the income, even if that's part of the project.
And like projected merch sales, projected tour sales, projected guarantees. Yeah.
Great. We have some projects that have committed funds already because it's an international tour, for example, with a visa. Is that eligible to be included in the application if not specifically covered by those funds? Because part of it's showing viability of the project, that you've done your homework and got the visas, but you're saying the funding can't go towards that cost.
Yeah, correct. So the budget and the application as a whole can definitely include costs that are part of the project but maybe happening now. But yeah, the grant funding just can't cover those costs. It can pay for the future costs. Yeah.
And does the idea have to be brand new, or can we keep doing something we've done before but with new artists? Or
yeah, you can. It can be both. So it could be a stage of a project. Just say you've already recorded an album and you want to make some video clips, that's fine. It doesn't have to be new music in the sense of new music to record. Yeah, it can also be something brand new that you're coming up with, a whole new collaboration, but it can be, you know, your fourth album with a band, you know, it's very broad.
Great. A question just about on that international touring and how you might indicate that that's going to benefit contemporary music in Victoria is a tricky one. Maybe it's about the skills you gain and what you bring back. My answer.
I guess it's and Jack, feel free to jump in if you have any other hot tips, but I guess it's around the networks you're creating, the partnerships, the bridges you're creating with that community that you're touring in, and how that might benefit friends, bands, other partners, other people back here, and create these kinds of networks. And Jack?
I would only add just Victorian music's reputation generally to exposure overseas is great for everyone.
Yeah.
Do you have any dot points, Chloe or Jack, on the common mistakes or things to avoid or things to keep in mind? I know that we always say check your budget a couple of times, that it all adds up. So it's great it does that for you now as well. We would also encourage people to get other people to read their applications, just to keep it straightforward, simple, to the point. The fluffy language doesn't fool peer assessors. It's just, you know, whether the project's good or not. But anything from your side of things?
Yeah, I mean, definitely getting someone who like isn't in your band or who isn't your manager to read your application is advised, because they're involved in the project. So of course it's going to make sense to them. Get your sibling or a parent or a friend from a different part of the arts to read it. Just if it makes sense to them, then it might make sense to the peer assessors who know nothing about your music potentially. So there's that. Make sure that, I know this is going to sound silly, but include audio material, like include videos or audio tracks. You'd be surprised how many people get so sucked into the planning and the timelines that they forget to include their music. And the panels, they want to listen to your music. That's what they love music. That's why they work in the music industry. So don't forget to include audio tracks. I'm trying to think.
I think that's a really good point on keeping it simple, Simone. I think people can get bogged down in trying to, I mean, they're pretty wordy guidelines and people can get really bogged down in trying to kind of hit every single point under every single criteria. It's sometimes better to step back and say, how am I achieving these two things? How is it good for me and my practice, and how is it good for the industry as a whole?
Yeah.
And just keeping it really simple and to the point. Yeah.
And also, I guess, I feel like there is a bit of a myth that grant applications need to be this very fluffy, very academic language or something like that. But do what makes sense to you. If it's dot points to answer the questions, that's fine. It can be simple. It just needs to be clear. Any way that helps you get across what it is that you want to do, how you want to do it, why you're doing it, etc., is fine.
What's the current success rate, or the last round success rate?
The last round of Music Works, Jack, I think you said before it was around.
I don't know Music Works specifically for the last round. I mean, I can check that, Simone, just not right now, but it is generally around 10 to 15%, I think, across a bunch of our programs. I think that's kind of a ballpark success rate figure. And
it's been a little bit different as well, as more people are applying for funding because of COVID relief programs and stuff like that. More people are aware of grant programs. So we've had a lot more applications than we usually have.
Are you accepting Google Drive links? I know Dropbox got excluded recently. It's things that can be changed that we...
So we don't accept Google Drive or Dropbox links or any kind of private links to websites and stuff. Essentially, upload the documents straight into the portal or put in SoundCloud links rather than material that can be kind of changed after the submission or that might require panel members to put in an email address to access it. Yeah.
I think you've kind of touched on this just in terms of getting quotes, but if you've tried to book flights, the prices jump all over the place at the moment. So is that just putting in your best guess or getting a screenshot that proves that they were that price at one point in time?
I mean, you could
because
put
of the
in
COVID context.
Yeah, you could put in screenshots of quotes, but also I feel like a way to go could be to like get 5 different quotes and then make an average kind of thing, like try to get a few options and then put in something that's a ballpark amount, so you're kind of in the middle. If it ends up being way more expensive or way cheaper, you're kind of covered. Yeah.
Another one, sorry, on support.
I was just going to add to that, it's fine to estimate things if they're unquantifiable too. It just might mean that before contracting we come back to you and say, can you please confirm X, Y, and Z before you release funding? So it doesn't have to be an exact science.
Right. And are support letters required now in support material?
So we generally don't need just generic support letters, but we prefer confirmation letters and from partners and people that you're actually directly going to be working with on the project, rather than generic support letters that just say that this person is great. Yeah.
Great. Sorry, the question's coming thick and fast now. Is there any sort of preference towards established artists in terms of Music Works?
I would say not necessarily. I mean, if you can demonstrate that you have, if you're an emerging artist, for example, and you can demonstrate that this opportunity is going to be really good for your practice and your career, and you've got an audience and a following, or it's going to really impact the sector in a certain way. I mean, it's really about answering the criteria, not so much around like how many years you've been together and how many albums you've put out. Jack, did you want to add anything?
I think panel members want to see applications that are kind of commensurate with the experience that you have. So if you haven't done much before and you're proposing an international tour, it's probably not something that's going to succeed. But if it's appropriate to your kind of career stage or emerging status, then I think there's every chance that it will also be considered by the panel as a good application. Yeah.
And also we do try to fund a broad distribution of activities. So, we're not going to fund only really, really, really established things, because we need to make sure that this funding is being spread across the whole sector, not just one specific part of the sector. So it definitely comes into consideration as well in that sense.
I would say there's obviously almost a lot of collective trauma in the industry at the moment. So I'm not sure that people will survive another rejection in some of the questions and comments that have been coming through. I guess I would just say that Creative Victoria have said that you can reach out and get feedback on previous grants to assist in, informing how you might apply for this round. I'd also say that I think you can apply with the same idea if it hasn't been funded, but obviously interrogate why that wasn't funded and try and get the feedback on that, and even get your colleagues and siblings to read it, and maybe it didn't make sense. One thing I might note, just given it's a Music Victoria session, is that we also have a in-house mental health clinician on our team at the moment. So her contact is, I'll put it in the chat, Bree at Music Victoria. So, in worst case scenario, you are unsuccessful in this process, or even find this process, just a lot of work and takes a toll on your mental health, I would encourage you to reach out because it has been such a rough time. And is there another round scheduled after this one, Chloe or Jack?
There's no Music Works rounds scheduled at this stage, but Music Works is funded for the next 4 years. So I'd expect to see future rounds of Music Works. When they'll be, I can't really speak to at the moment. We're just focusing on trying to get this one out the door. But I would just stay tuned to Creative Victoria social media channels, etc. And Music Victoria is always pretty quick to announce these things too. So if there's music-related funding announced in the future, that's where you'll hear about it.
Right. I've got one question about COVID Safe Plan template. Yes, they are on the Victorian COVID website, and I can link you in with that. Zula, yes, a band can apply for a new album. How can it be described as a new idea? I guess that's about reflecting on your practice and what you're exploring and what's new about it. Can you apply to go to South by Southwest in March 22?
Oh, good question. I mean, technically, yes, this program is for activity after the 1st of March 2022. But I guess you'd want to have that confirmed, and also the timelines around notification and stuff might be a little bit tight, but it's certainly something that is eligible to do.
Just having another look through the questions. I think we've done pretty well.
And obviously, if anyone's got any specific questions or we don't quite get to yours, feel free to give me or my colleagues, Marsha and Rain, a call, and we can have a more in-depth chat about your ideas and your project. Yeah.
I think there's often unsurety of how much to apply for, whether it's one thing to say apply for what you need, but you also might be able to make it work with less. Is there any chance of part funding?
So we don't do part funding. We used to, but we have found that when we have offered part funding, it then affects the viability of people being able to do what they actually want to do and being able to achieve those impacts that they set out to achieve. So we do usually just fund the project as a whole. But if you want to chat about your budget or, should we apply for this stage or this whole big thing, again, just give us a call and we can kind of chat through some ideas and help you figure that out.
And are music schools eligible to apply for this for music production with students?
Good question, Jack.
That is a really good question. I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head, Samantha. I would have to really go through those eligibility guidelines. Maybe I'll take that on notice if that's all right.
Yeah. Similarly, community-based music organisations.
So I think it would be dependent on where their operational funding is coming from, Simone, but I'll check that. And
it depends on the project, whether they want to do. Yeah.
And can people get funding for assets, I guess, like merch or physical vinyl t-shirts?
You can certainly get funding to cover the production of records and CDs, tapes, t-shirts, whatever it might be. In terms of equipment, so studio gear, musical instruments, etc., those kinds of assets, in the guidelines it does say what will not be funded: equipment purchases or hire costs that are not directly related to your project or activity and which do not address the program's aims and priorities. any equipment costs included in budgets must be justified in supporting documentation. So essentially, if you want to buy equipment and gear, let's say yes, but you need to actually make it relevant. So if you're going on a tour, you can't spend 10K hiring recording equipment. It needs to be related.
Yeah, I think it's a case of, if you're not feeling sure about including it, I really encourage you to probably just get on the phone and have a chat to us and we can talk it through.
And cost for web designer or development eligible as part of delivery of the project?
Yeah, that would be fine. I guess keeping in mind the program's aims, which are really to support the music industry and other artists. So you can certainly include those kinds of costs in your budget to make your project happen. But we'll kind of try to, you know, put the funding into the Victorian music industry and other artists.
And how broad, I guess, in the scope of projects can we go? Can we do recording and merch and a tour, or stick to one thing to keep it simple?
Yeah, I mean, you certainly can go the whole package if you want to, but that's a lot to organise and a lot to squish into an application with character counts and stuff like that. So it really depends on, you know, what you want to do and what you want to achieve. Jack, did you want to jump in as well?
No, I think that's good advice. I mean, if you're applying for the full amount, like what's the best use of that money? How are you going to make that work the most and have the biggest impact? Is it concentrating on one aspect of things, or is it spreading it across many different things? It's really up to you as an applicant to make that decision, I think.
I guess that also comes back to viability, because one of the questions here is about whether this should be a contribution to a much bigger project, which might not be viable until it also gets the other component, or if we scale it back and make it a more, while also having matched financial support, a smaller kind of pitch. Any preference?
Again, it really just depends on what people want to do and how they can make the case the strongest in the application.
I think we certainly have in the past funded a portion of a much bigger project that has other funding coming from other places, and so that's certainly not something we wouldn't fund.
There's also questions about previous success, and while previous success in music works, I would say, doesn't automatically, you know, count towards this one. I think what does count is your knowledge of the systems and processes of writing the application and the fact that you have been able to successfully or not do that. But I think this is where it comes back to seeking out that feedback that Creative Victoria have generously offered and checking in with them. I think this session's been great, and we've only got 2 minutes left, and I'm sure there's more questions that will come up when people do start writing it and getting into the nitty-gritty of it. Again, just reach out to both Creative Victoria and Music Victoria, and we'll always try and do what we can to help you to get it up. Obviously, we realise the timelines are quite short and we are all very busy, but this is money that's out there and on the table, and we're very excited to be opening up and being able to do things again. I'd also just share with attendees that we do have Sustaining Creative Workers funding available at the moment, which is a different program, and it's smaller amounts of money, but that is also all going to be out the door and announced by the end of the year. So that is about sustaining creative workers, maybe to do this sort of work in the future. Any final words from Creative Victoria?
My last tip is don't leave it to the last minute.
Wise words.
I second that, absolutely. And the 3 o'clock deadline is a good one to remember too, because it's a funny time, and that'll be the end of it. Sorry, I was just going to say thanks so much, Simone, for organising this at such short notice, and so great to see so many people interested.
And there'll be more watching back this afternoon outside work hours. There was just another question about diversity and if there's any weighting other than, I mean, we've got the First Nations stream and the disability stream. Is there diversity of music genres supported, or any sort of balancing in that sense, or just?
I mean, it comes into the broad distribution. Like, we're Creative Victoria, so we do like to support, you know, a broad range of things across the Victorian music industry. So that would include different genres, different locations, different little pockets of the sector. So yeah.
Okay,
And
great.
we do recruit, sorry, just the panels we recruit to try and make the expertise on the panels spread across genres and as inclusive as possible.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And I will follow up with everyone who's attended with an email linking to all the relevant places of information to make sure that you can just click straight through and get started. But thanks again, and see you for the next session. We've got another one on a different topic, but Music Victoria is running daily information sessions this week on a wide range of topics. So tune in. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.